My ex-wife cheated on me and thought she'd get my parents' money in the divorce. Now she's broke, so I'm 51 and my second wife Emma is divorcing me. I didn't see this coming, but I should have. When you're in it, you miss the red flags. Anyway, before I get to the messy part, let me start from the beginning. This whole thing is wild. My first wife, Karen, died in a car accident about 10 years ago. We had a daughter, Julie, who was 12 at the time. I didn't have time to grieve. I became Julie's support system. Julie grew up and went to college. She was smart and got into a good school in Manhattan. That's when things got really quiet at home. I started going to the bar after work. It seemed harmless at first. I'd go in, have a drink, and chat with the bartender. I went home and I saw Emma at the bar almost every night. We talked for a while and I think she noticed I was there a lot. I sat there drinking until it was late, and I went home to an empty house. It was depressing, but I didn't want to admit it. One night, Emma asked if I was okay. She could tell something was off, but I wasn't trying to hide it. We got talking and she seemed nice. I was 11 years younger, but I didn't care. I just wanted someone to talk to. Now I know what you're thinking. She was young. He was a young bartender going through a midlife crisis. I thought the same thing. I wasn't planning on anything serious. Emma was different. She made you feel like you mattered. She was genuinely interested in what you had to say. Julie was off living her life and I was just stuck in mine. After a few weeks, Emma made the first move. I wasn't expecting it. She asked me out and I said yes. I had nothing better going on. We started dating and it was good. She had a kid, Jack, from a previous relationship. The guy bailed on her when she got pregnant. She'd been raising the kid on her own. I respected her for toughing it out. We bonded. We were both alone, dealing with our own problems. Things moved faster than I expected. After a year, we got married. I had my doubts, but I went with it. I was too deep in at that point to back out. Julie had met her by then and gave me the green light. She just wanted me to be happy. She knew how rough it was after her mom passed. She saw how much I'd changed since being with Emma. So we had a small, quiet wedding. Just me, Emma, her kid, and her sister Carrie. Now, Emma and Carrie had their own story. They were both abandoned by their parents when they were little. They ended up in an orphanage. It wasn't something they talked about much, but it explained a lot about why Emma was the way she was. She was tough, independent, and I admired that, but looking back, I wonder if all that baggage should have been a red flag. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. The first year of marriage was fine. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. We went on trips and did the happy couple thing. I bonded with Jack. He reminded me of Julie when she was little. Everything was perfect, but then Emma quit her job. She said she wanted to spend more time with Jack. Time with Jack was fine, but I was the only one bringing money in. I could afford it at first because I was doing well in my family's real estate business. But things shifted, and I didn't notice at first. Emma's spending habits caused problems. It started with little things like new clothes for Jack and stuff for the house. Then it got bigger. I kept paying for expensive clothes, jewelry, and spa days. I didn't want to admit that something felt off. Then Julie came home for Christmas and saw what was happening. She told me I was spending too much on Emma. It wasn't normal at first. I brushed it off. I told her she was overreacting, but deep down I knew she was right. Emma wasn't like my first wife, Karen. Karen never cared about material stuff, but Emma lived for it. That conversation with Julie was the wake-up call I needed. I started keeping track of what I was spending. Emma wasn't just asking for things. She was expecting them. The more I thought about it, I was being played and I didn't even see it. I started pulling back and told Emma we needed to cut back on spending. That's when things really went downhill. She got defensive, saying I was being cheap and didn't appreciate her. Then she started accusing me of letting Julie turn me against her. It was like everything I did wasn't enough. She wanted more money, more stuff, more everything. Looking back, I didn't see the signs sooner because I didn't want to believe someone I cared about could be so selfish. But once you start noticing things, it's hard to unsee them. Things got worse after I told Emma we needed to cut back on spending. I thought after a serious talk about finances, I tried to be more responsible. Nope, she did the opposite. It's like telling her no just flipped a switch. I didn't grow up rich. My family's real estate business is doing well, but I wasn't raised to throw money around. My dad taught me the value of a dollar. With Emma, it felt like she saw me as an ATM. After that conversation, she started acting entitled. One of the first red flags happened when I cut back on the joint account. I didn't stop putting money in, but she came at me like I'd insulted her. She said, "What, am I not worth it anymore? You think I'm some charity case now?" I just looked at her like, "What are you talking about?" It wasn't just about the money. It was how she started treating me. There was this shift. She didn't even respect me. She used to be sweet. Now I was the enemy. Every time I brought up spending, she'd flip it back on me. "I sacrificed my job for this family, and now you're going to treat me like I'm useless." I never said anything like that. I just wanted her to be more responsible. She made it out like I was punishing her. Let's talk about the job thing. I was fine with her quitting to be home with Jack. I actually thought it was a good move at the time. Now she was using it as leverage, like I owed her everything because she quit her job to be a full-time mom. Being a parent is hard work, but I didn't sign up to fund a fashion show. She wasn't spending the money on Jack or the house. She was spending it all on herself. Maybe she was married, but I didn't notice until now. Either way, the money was going out faster than I could keep up with. I wasn't going to go broke, but I wasn't about to let her drain me dry either. Then came the parties. Emma loved to party. We'd go out, have a good time, but now, she was going out all the time. I'd come home from work and she wouldn't even be there. She'd be out with her friends partying until 2 o'clock or 3 in the morning. I was the one at home with Jack. I didn't mind. Jack's a good kid. I cared about him. But Emma, she was off doing God knows what. I was starting to get suspicious. I tried talking to her about it, but she just accused me of trying to control her. She made me feel guilty for not partying one night. Things came to a head on Thursday. I thought we could talk, but when I got home, the house was empty. I texted and called her, but she didn't respond. She didn't come home until 3 a.m. when she finally stumbled in, drunk. I asked her where she'd been and she just shrugged, saying, "Out with friends." I lost it. I told her this wasn't working and that she needed to get her act together or we were done. She laughed and said I couldn't do anything about it. I started pulling back. I stopped giving her money directly. I thought maybe she'd get the message, but she doubled down. She started using my credit card without asking. I had to cancel it just to stop her. When she realized I wasn't giving in, she started getting nasty. She couldn't believe I'd cut her off like that. That's when she started threatening me. I made a mistake by pushing her to do something drastic. I asked her what she meant, but she just gave me this cold smile and said, "You'll find out soon enough." I should have known what was coming, but I was still trying to save the marriage. Looking back, I realized there was nothing to fix. Emma wasn't interested in saving anything. She was only interested in what she could get from me. It all came to a head when, a couple of weeks later, I came home early and caught her in the act. This is where everything hit the fan. You always think you'll notice something big, but when it happens, it catches you off guard. I knew something was going to happen with Emma, but I didn't think it'd go this way. I noticed Emma was getting distant. She was gone more and more. When she was around, I felt like I didn't exist. I started to get suspicious, but I kept telling myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was just going through a phase or mad about me cutting her off. What happened next? I had a right to be suspicious. It was Wednesday. I was supposed to be at the office, but one of my meetings got canceled. I decided to head home early and surprise her. I wanted to believe we could fix things. Maybe we could sit down and have a real conversation. I pulled into the driveway and everything seemed normal. Her car was there, which I thought was a good sign. Maybe she wasn't out partying. Maybe she was home with Jack. We could just have a quiet evening. I walked inside and right away something felt off. The house was too quiet. I called out for Emma, but there was no answer. I checked the kitchen and backyard. I got to the bedroom and saw that the door was cracked and I could hear voices. I knew what was happening, but I couldn't process it. I wanted to turn around and leave, but I had to know. I pushed the door open, and there they were. Emma was in bed with a guy I didn't know. They didn't hear me at first. The guy finally noticed me and jumped up to put his clothes on. Emma didn't look surprised. She just sat there calm. You'd think I would have lost it, but I didn't. As you'd expect, I was shocked. I stood there, staring at her, trying to understand what I was seeing. I felt nothing. The guy left the room, saying he was sorry. I didn't look at him. My eyes were on Emma. I waited for her to speak. She didn't apologize or explain. She just said, I caught her eating the last cookie from the jar. I asked if she'd been cheating, but she just shrugged. I didn't expect a big scene. I didn't yell or scream. I just stood there, letting the reality sink in. I told her to leave. She didn't argue or try to explain. She just got up and started packing. I sat on the bed, wondering how I'd ended up here. It wasn't perfect, but I didn't deserve this. She took some clothes, her laptop, and a few personal things, and then she was gone. No goodbye, no I'm sorry. She just walked out like it was no big deal. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, going over every moment of our relationship. I tried to figure out where it all went wrong. How did I not see it? Was I blind the whole time? Or did I ignore it? I didn't want to believe them. The next day, I thought she'd come back. I thought she'd realize what she'd done and try to fix it. She didn't. She served me divorce papers a week later. I wasn't surprised, but when I looked at the papers, I saw something that did surprise me. She was asking for $500,000. She must have overheard me talking about my family's trust fund and assumed I had access to all that money. But the trust fund wasn't mine. It was set up for Julie after my first wife died. Emma had no legal claim to it. When I saw the number, I couldn't help but laugh. She was going to get a payday. I had to give her credit. She really thought she was about to pull one over on me. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I called my lawyer and filled him in on everything. He told me to hold off on responding to the papers until he had a chance to look them over. I was ready to fight this in court. There was no way in hell she was. I wasn't going to give her a dime, especially after what she did. After she left, the house felt just as empty as it did before I met her. Instead of feeling lonely, I felt relieved. I had a legal battle ahead of me, but at least I didn't have to deal with her anymore. That's when I realized something. I didn't lose anything. She lost. I gave her a life, stability, and support. She was a stranger to me. I wasn't going to let her get away with screwing me over financially. After Emma walked out and dropped the divorce papers on me, things didn't slow down. The cheating was bad, but the divorce was worse. If I thought catching her in bed with another guy was the low point, I had no idea what she had up her sleeve next. I took those divorce papers straight to my lawyer, Tim. He's a good guy and could handle this without dragging it out forever. When I handed him the papers, he raised an eyebrow at the $500,000 demand. He looked at me like, is she serious? I just shrugged. What could I say? Emma thought she'd hit the jackpot with me. Tim looked through the pages, made notes, and mumbled to himself. After a few minutes, he looked up and said, she's not getting the trust fund money. That's for your daughter. She's not going to touch it. I nodded. I wasn't worried about the trust fund. She had the nerve to ask for it in the first place. She thought she could just walk out of my life and take my money. Not happening. Tim found the kicker. She wanted the house too. She wanted the place where I'd lived for years. Even before I met her. She wanted the house I'd lived in for over a decade. I couldn't help but laugh. Tim wasn't laughing. He said we couldn't underestimate how low she was willing to go. The more outrageous the demands, the more room to negotiate. I realized Emma wasn't just greedy. She was strategic. The next couple of weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with Tim, gathering documents, and preparing for the first court hearing. I tried to keep things normal at home, but I felt sick every time I walked through the front door. This was the house we were fighting over. I couldn't relax in it without thinking about that. Meanwhile, Emma was out living her best life. I'd get texts from friends saying they saw her out at bars, fancy restaurants, or on vacation with that guy she cheated with. She was flaunting it like she didn't have a care in the world. I called Tim immediately, and I went to the bank and closed it. I wish I could have seen her face when she realized the well had dried up. That's when the real fun started. A couple of days later, I got a flurry of texts from Emma. They were angry. She accused me of being petty. She said I was punishing her for leaving. I'm not. I just don't want to fund her vacations with her new boyfriend. She called and left long messages about how I was forcing her hand and that she didn't want to see what she was capable of. It was dramatic, but I wasn't fazed. I saved the messages. Tim said they might come in handy later. Here's where it gets interesting. The first court hearing was coming up, and I was ready. I had everything lined up, including documents, bank statements, and evidence of her cheating. Tim had it all sorted, but Emma showed up to court like she was walking the runway. She brought the guy with her, but I didn't react. I knew better than to. She wanted a big scene, but I just sat there letting Tim do his thing. Her lawyer demanded $500,000, the house, and spousal support. She said she'd given up her job for the family and couldn't support herself. Tim was ready. He shot down the trust fund demand and explained to the judge that it wasn't even in my name, and Emma had no legal claim to it. She looked angry, but her lawyer quickly moved on to the house. Tim then said that the house wasn't fully his either. It was part of a business trust set up by his parents, and Emma had no claim to it. She didn't know any of this. I watched her face go from smug to pale in seconds. Then she realized what was going on. Last time, Tim showed the judge all the evidence of her cheating. This included texts, bank records, and photos of her with her boyfriend. The judge wasn't impressed. Emma's lawyer tried to say she'd been forced into the affair because I was distant, but the evidence was strong. It was clear what had happened. The hearing was over, and Emma looked devastated. The judge ruled in my favor, and she got nothing. It was the best feeling in the world. We've still got a couple more hearings, but I'm not worried. I've got Tim in my corner, and Emma's lost her upper hand. She thought she could play me, but it looks like she played herself. There's still more to come. I'll keep you posted. Update 2 after the court hearing. Emma got slapped with reality. You'd think she'd back off. She didn't. She doubled down trying to pull one last stunt before the final. After the first court hearing, I thought things were over. Tim rejected her demands, and I was happy about it. Emma wasn't taking it well. I hadn't heard from her since the hearing, which was fine with me. I was waiting for the divorce settlement. But then, about a week later, I got a knock on my door. It was Emma. I wasn't ready for that. I hadn't seen her since court. I didn't want to see her. She was calm. We were just going to chat. This wasn't going to go well. Can we talk? She asked. I should have slammed the door, but I didn't. I opened the door and let her in. I thought she was there to apologize, but she wasn't. We sat down in the living room, and she started with the usual. Then she told me the real reason she was there. Let's not go to court. Let's settle this quietly. Give me the house and some money. Let me get this straight. She wanted me to give her the house. Couldn't believe it. She was still living in a fantasy world. I just stared at her for a second. Was she serious? Emma, you're not getting the house. We already talked about this in court. She sighed like I didn't understand. But this is different. We don't have to involve the lawyers. We can just come to an agreement. That's when it clicked. She was desperate. She knew she wouldn't get anything from the court. So now she was trying to manipulate me. She wanted something, but I wasn't falling for it. I was done being nice. I told her, you made your choices, and now you'll have to deal with the consequences. Her whole demeanor changed. She was back to being entitled and selfish. You think you're better than me? I gave up everything for this marriage. You're just going to leave me with nothing. I stood up and pointed to the door. You gave up everything, spent my money, trashed our marriage, and tried to take me for $500,000. You've got some nerve acting like I owe you anything. She didn't move. She just stood there glaring at me. I wasn't going to give her what she wanted. I was done being manipulated. She stormed out of the house. I sat back down, feeling like I just dodged a bullet. Sure enough, a couple of days later, I got a letter from her lawyer. She was trying to drag me back to court. This time, she was demanding spousal support. She was claiming she said I wasn't supporting her because I made her give up her career for our marriage. It was the same old story. She threw in some nonsense about emotional abuse, trying to make me look bad. But Tim was ready. He'd seen this kind of thing before. We gathered all the evidence. We had the joint account records, texts, and voicemails where she was threatening me. We even had photos of her partying with her new guy while still living off my money. By the time we got back to court, Emma didn't stand a chance. The judge didn't believe her excuses. Tim laid out the full story. He brought up how she was living the high life while claiming she was struggling and tried to get money from me even after she cheated. The judge ruled in my favor. Emma was walking away with nothing. When the final ruling came through, I felt bad for Jack. He didn't ask for any of this. He was just a kid caught in the middle. I couldn't keep supporting him forever. Emma was his mom, and she was going to have to figure things out for herself. I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore. After everything was finalized, I took a few days off work to process it all. It was weird this huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but at the same time I couldn't help but think about how close I came to losing everything Emma. I thought she could walk all over me, but she played herself. That's where it ended. I'm free now, and I'm never getting myself into that situation again. Marriage is no thanks. I'll stick to being single for a while, maybe forever. Thanks to everyone who followed along with this. Your support kept me going. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't let anyone take advantage of you. Sometimes people show you who they really are. Believe them anyway. That's it for me. Time to move on. Let me know how it goes. If you need more changes or ideas, ask.